let's look at New Zealand. It's happening across a lot of other places as well, but we'll start with New Zealand. We have some clips of this, so take a look.
Okay.
As part of our overall national response to this new outbreak, I am now directing medical officers of health that all cases, confirmed cases, are to be managed in a quarantine facility. Now, this is different to how positive cases were managed when we were last at levels 4 and indeed 3, and shows how serious we are about limiting any risk of ongoing transmission, even in self-isolation and including to others in the household. This will apply to any cases and also close family members who might be at risk as appropriate. A reminder, these facilities have been set up specifically and have excellent processes and resources in place to look after people with COVID-19, including health staff on site at all times, and it will help us avoid any further inadvertent spread into the community as part of our overall response.
I've got a number of questions about people refuse. What do we do if someone refuses to be tested? Well, they can't now. If someone refuses in our facilities to be tested, they have to keep staying. So they won't be able to leave after 14 days. They have to stay on for another 14 days. So it's a pretty good incentive. You either get your tests done and make sure you're cleared, or we will keep you in a facility longer. So I think most people will look at that and say, I'll take the test.
There's something about how smug that Prime Minister is that is very disturbing, and she's just coming off the back of a landslide win, right? She's been re-elected as Prime Minister in New Zealand. We had reported lightly on the idea that these internment camps may be there, and now I guess, there's probably people that don't want to go along with the test, and she's like, fine, we'll throw you in there and throw away the key.
Yeah, and that was Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, the first clip of that gentleman. He's the Minister of Health in New Zealand. So this isn't some health official in some small city somewhere with a harebrained idea. This is the head guy in New Zealand. And like you said, it's Prime Minister Ardern in New Zealand as well, who's saying this with a smile. And Dr. Bloomfield said, remember, all confirmed cases, this is a change in policy, all confirmed cases are going to be managed in a quarantine facility. So what does that look
right
like?
There is disturbing, right? Because what we're seeing is something we've been seeing in America too, I think, is it's like it just keeps clamping tighter and tighter, whether there's success or no success. I mean, New Zealand seems to have avoided getting any cases on their little island. Now, of course, they have no tourism. They're going to be bankrupt in God knows how long because no one can make any money. Nobody can travel there. If you do, you're going to this internment camp. But the idea that's saying, even though we've been successful, we're even clamping down harder. And this is like the bright shining star of the World Health Organization, this approach, right? I mean, it makes you think how many countries are going to be using this approach. And this idea of testing, right? The PCR test is not very accurate. Is that the test that they plan on using?
Yeah, from my understanding, absolutely. And we've had if you will, like a beta test of this just happening recently with 3 British teens. They were in Italy. They were teaching over there, and they tested positive for the coronavirus, and they were put in a quarantine facility. And there you see the headline. And in the article, I'm going to read this quote from there because this is important to give people an idea what they may be in for. It says, quote, all of their symptoms had cleared up within 2 days of the test result, but the 3 men were put in a converted hotel, kept in separate rooms with food brought to their door in plastic tubs. Despite feeling well and being told that they were unlikely to be infectious, they kept testing positive and could not meet the requirement of 2 negative test results. The process left them totally confused, given WHO guidelines saying they should have been discharged within 2 weeks. They said medics had told them that tests were probably detecting dead coronavirus cells that are left in their systems. Luckily for these kids, the law changed and it allowed only extended time without symptoms instead of those 2 negative tests because they were
months, right? After 2 months, the law changes. I mean, that's got to be terrifying. And I would imagine if you're in there, you're thinking, what are we really being held for? Who's doing these tests? What laboratory? Are we really even testing positive? Are they lying to us? Can you imagine how convenient this is going to be to take away anyone's due process in any country? Yeah, we're just picking you up, and you're testing positive, so we've got you while they investigate, try to figure out, what they're going to charge you with. Imagine if criminals start getting handled like this. I mean, it's really really scary. But it's not just Italy, right? We're starting to see this. It's not just New Zealand. Where else have we been seeing this discussion?
Yeah, we're seeing it in Canada. In Canada, they're actually having open debate on the House floor regarding these camps. So we have this clip here of Randy Hillier. He's a politician from Ontario. So let's take a look at this one.
All right.
Next question, the member for Lanark Frontenac Kingston.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Premier. In my supplemental question yesterday, I asked this government if the people of Ontario should prepare for internment camps. In September, the federal government posted a call for expressions of interest for contractors to supply, provide and manage quarantine isolation camps throughout every province and every territory in Canada. These quarantine isolation camps, however, are not limited to people with COVID, but provide a wide latitude for many people to be detained. Surely this government is aware of the intentions to build these isolation camps from coast to coast. And my question to the Premier is, how many of these camps will be built, and how many people does this government expect to detain?
Question. Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is very true that when people leave the country and when they come back in, that the province is suggesting, and the federal government, in cooperation with the federal government, we are suggesting that people isolate themselves. That has been a practice that has been very successful, not only here in the province of Ontario, but across Canada. And we will, of course, be redoubling our efforts to make sure that the people of the province of Ontario remain safe, Mr. Speaker. So if the member is referring to the fact that that one of the public health policies is that when you return from a jurisdiction outside of the province of Ontario or from another country that you isolate yourself for 2 weeks, I would suggest that has been a good policy that has been working. In fact, this House has been doing the same thing since we came back. We are working in cohorts to make sure that the Legislative Assembly can continue to operate. That's why we have 2 separate cohorts, Mr. Speaker.
Response.
With the cooperation of the official opposition, that is why all members of the Independents have been excluded from that cohort, because we want them to be able to participate in debate. So we will continue to do everything in our power to make sure that this House continues, but that the people of the province of Ontario and Canada are kept safe.
Supplementary question.
Again, back to the Premier. Here's the RFP, and in the RFP it uses clear language to express that these camps can be used for a broad spectrum of people, not limited to travellers. Indeed, it doesn't even mention international travellers. It's just a broad latitude of people. And I'll send over the copy of the RFP after. So your government must be in negotiations and aware of these plans to potentially detain and isolate citizens and residents of our country and our province. So, Speaker, to the Premier, where will these camps be built? How many people will be detained? And for what reasons? For what reasons can people be kept in these isolation camps? And I'd like to have the Premier assure the people of Ontario.
Member, take a seat.
What happened there? Did he get a response?
Looks like he got his. Yeah, it looks like he had his microphone cut, his audio cut on his microphone.
So this isn't a question that's allowed here, even though he seems to be reading from government documents, a discussion of who were we putting in these internment camps. Very, very disturbing, right? And these are, and how many people are aware this is happening in their governments? How many governments are having these conversations and we don't even know what's going on? Right. And we have a part of that contract we can take a look at from Canada, where it does not say international travelers. So this is from Public Health Canada, and some of the quotes in there, it says, in anticipation of possible continued need for quarantine sites over the next 1 to 2 years, given the COVID-19 pandemic, PHAC is considering having a third-party service provider provide and manage the existing sites and all the related services on its behalf. Goes on to say security services 24/7 at the sites by licensed guards, which will be contracted separately. Now, in this contract, it admits there's 11 sites currently, and they're looking at possibly expanding that to nine more. So
this is a contract for a third-party service to manage those, and it, like Hillier said in there, it doesn't say international travelers. It actually leaves it open for a wide range of people, depending on the need for during this COVID-19 pandemic.
It's really scary, man, when you start thinking of all the tracking discussions and the cell phones and big tech joining with pharma and pushing this in governments. And now, you know, guards around internment camps in Canada, of all places. I went to film school in Canada. That is not a really very rebellious crowd. I'm pretty sure they would go along with, like, hey, I'll just stay in my house. I'm cool, man. You don't need to stick me in a prison. Really scary stuff. I mean, and it makes you think, is this, you know, the ghost of Christmas future? Is this where we're all going? I mean, it sounds like the WHO must be dictating this to the different nations around the world. And I just keep imagining, while this is going on, in China, the biggest dance parties breaking world records are taking place. Based on the things I said, you know, it's unbelievable. And I imagine people are saying, well, what about America? We're not that crazy, right?
Yeah, well, it's refreshing to see people stand up like they did there in Canada. And I remember from May, you took concern to what someone said in Ventura County. This was Robert Levin, Ventura County's public health director, and we have a clip of that. So let's take a look at what he said.
We are beginning a program today, which will certainly grow into something larger and larger, and that is a community contact tracing program. We've done contact tracing all along. When we find someone who has a COVID infection, those people are immediately isolated. But we also work with them to figure out who their contacts were. As we do more testing, we will find more and more people who have COVID-19. And again, we'll isolate every one of them, and we will find every one of their contacts, and we will make sure that they stay quarantined, and we'll check in with them every day. We're going to do a more complete job, and we're going to do a more meticulous job of making it less and less possible for others in the county to run into someone with COVID-19 infection. It's not just our county. There are going to be thousands of people hired who will be these contact investigators throughout the state. And this is occurring in many, many other states as well, perhaps all of the states in our country. Some of the people we find are going to have trouble being isolated. For instance, if they live in a home where there's only one bathroom and there are 3 or 4 other people living there, and those people don't have COVID infection, we're not going to be able to keep the person in that home. Every person who we're isolating, for instance, needs to have their own bathroom. And so we'll be moving people like this into other kinds of housing that we have available.